All right, guys, Dr. Greg here. The number one most misunderstood concept in all of medicine is this. It's drainage. Quite simply stated, drainage is how God designed things to get out of your body. And I'll tell you right now, it's stagnant or insufficient drainage that is robbing you of the optimal health that you could be experiencing right now, but you're more than likely not. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what are the drainage pathways, what are the things that you might be experiencing if those drainage pathways are not functioning properly, and more, just giving you awareness of what drainage is. Okay, there are 7 drainage pathways in the body. And the first thing I want you to think about as I dive into every single one of these is think of these pathways as like a funnel. And if any one of those 7 intricate parts of that funnel are sluggish or clogged, you need to know this. Your body is always dumping things into that funnel. So if you're dumping things into a funnel with the hope of them exiting the bottom of the funnel, but that funnel is clogged up, things will overflow. And what I need to tell you right now is a lot of your symptoms that you're experiencing are the overflow of poor drainage. So, okay, remember there's 7 of them. Number 1 is the gut. And right, pretty obvious, like we poop things out. But the reality is just because you're pooping does not mean that your gut is functioning optimally. So first off, what is optimal gut function? In my opinion, 2 good full voids a day. Now, some people might be having 2 movements, but they're just like, there's not much there, okay? Now, obviously, what you excrete is equally proportional to the volume and what you're consuming as well. So 2 good poops a day is good movement. Now, for some of you, you're constipated. You're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had 2 good poops in a week. Well, yes, that's poor drainage. That means everything that's being dumped into your colon is not being processed the way that it's supposed to. And I got to tell you this, if things don't move through the colon the way that they're supposed to, your body, as gross as this may sound, will actually reabsorb some of those things and try to reprocess them. Yuck. Okay. The second side of that is a gut that's moving too quickly, right? So the concept of too quickly is this conversation of your body, your gut not doing what it's supposed to do, and things are just rushing through. So that's loose stools or diarrhea. So 2 good voids a day. That's number 1. The second, so what are some signs of a poor function? So obviously the frequency of your bowel patterns, but also indigestion, bloating, full stomach. That's important. Also, you need to understand that your gut shares a nervous system with your low back and your pelvis. So if you have chronic low back pain or pelvic pain, or you go to the chiropractor and you just can't hold those adjustments, you got to look to the gut because they share the same neurology. Second one is the liver. So your liver sits, remember, right below your right rib cage. There's 2 ways that your liver dumps. The first one is through the bile. So you have this thing called your gallbladder. Your gallbladder squirts something called bile into your small intestine, and it breaks down fats from your foods. The second option is through a venous system. So there's literally like a trap door on your liver, and it takes the process through something called your hepatobiliary vein. So that goes down to the left, and about where it hits your belly button, it turns into what's called your hemorrhoid vein. And then the hemorrhoid vein peaks out about 4 or 5 inches before the exit point. Like, how intelligent is that it's going to dump the worst of its worst that close to the exit point so it can just get out? So that's other ways that the liver dumps. Now understand, your liver obviously does not have its own hole. So your liver is dependent upon the gut for it to drain. The third one is again, signs and symptoms all over the place here today. So signs and symptoms. So you could maybe wake up between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. In Chinese medicine, they talk about the liver's active time is 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. So if you're restless or you're waking up during that time, Chinese medicine also tells us that the liver is associated with anger and resentment. Maybe some time for some emotional work. You could have some referred pain up into your shoulder blades or in between your back. Those are other signs that your liver's not functioning well. Or if you eat a fattier meal and you have loose stools, that's another sign. Your urinary system, your bladder, right? So obviously, think about this. When we do toxicity testing in our patients, it's actually a urine test. So we're asking what heavy metals, what molds, what environmental toxins are you literally peeing out of your body? So there's all kinds of demand of that drainage pathway. So signs could be like bladder infection or something called interstitial cystitis. Some people have really putrid smelling urine. Those are some signs and symptoms that that drainage pathway may not be functioning well. The next one I want to jump into is your lymphatic system. So you've heard of the lymphatic system because you've heard of lymph nodes, right? You've maybe been to the doctor and they're checking maybe your throat. You have lymph nodes like in your groin area and up in your armpits. And you know, like when you don't feel well, sometimes those lymph nodes can get swollen and tender. So understand that like from your waist down, there's all kinds of lymphatic tissue. Maybe at the end of the day, when you take your socks off, there's a crease in your lower leg where the top of your socks were. That's poor movement of the drainage component of the lymphatic system. You need to know this too, that the gut and the liver are 80% responsible for processing lymphatic tissue. So if you have stagnant lymphatic tissue, that doesn't help things. But then if your gut and your liver aren't functioning well, that can even further put a strain on that drainage pathway. The next sign is drainage pathway is your glymphatic system. So your brain has its own lymphatic system. It's called the glymphatic system, and this is why we don't eat 2 to 3 hours before we go to bed. If you eat 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, you have told your body blood supply that was supposed to go to my brain and clean out my brain tissue while I was sleeping, you have forced it to go to your gut and digest the food that you just ate. Okay, so that is one of the ways that we come around that. Now, what are some signs of a not well functioning lymphatic system? Brain fog, blurry vision. Lack of energy could even be another sign of a stagnant glymphatic system. And by the way, you guys, I mean, with the rise of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and dementia, like you've got to be maximizing your brain health. There's just no two questions about it. Okay. The third thing are your sweat glands. So your body is designed to dump things out of your sweat glands, primarily to cool your body when you're working out, but it's also a pathway your body can get rid of some toxicity. And respectfully, like you've been around some people that they just straight up stink. That means their body is like literally effervescing through their pores toxicity. Ugh. We've all been there, right? I also have patients that can't sweat. And these are tough cases. They maybe have chronic Lyme disease or chronic mold toxicity, and their body literally does not have that drainage pathway. Okay? So that's the next one. The last one is the respiratory system. Now, I believe that this is the most underappreciated drainage pathway of the body. Think about it. Every drop of air you've ever breathed in your life is processed by your respiratory system. So what is your respiratory system? So you have sinuses above your eyes. They're called your frontal sinuses. You have frontal sinuses below your eyes. They're called your maxillary sinuses. And then you have your entire lung fields. Now, keep in mind, when your body gets stressed, there's this very interesting work that I did with a world famous physical therapist many years ago. And he found out that when the body gets stressed, it actually prioritizes the left lung field. And the left lung is actually only has 2 lobes. Your heart takes up a big chunk of it. And the right lung field kind of it loses tone. So in neurology, it loses tone. It loses its ability to do its full job. So what happens then is you essentially lose the full capacity of this 3-lobe monster lung on your right side. So if you've been exposed to molds or toxic environments, pesticides, herbicides, that can have a deleterious effect to your respiratory system. So what are the signs? Shortness of breath, chronic cough, wheezy, sinus pressure. Those are even just known exposures to these things, right? Now, let's take this a step further. If that right lung field, if that right diaphragm is not doing its job to optimize your right lung, keep in mind that your liver sits right below your right diaphragm. So if that right diaphragm is not moving the way that it's supposed to, then the liver is not getting pumped by that diaphragmatic muscle, which helps dump the liver, by the way. Crazy stuff, you guys. So there are ways that we can go in and address every single one of these drainage pathways, but it's important for you to understand and have tools in your toolbox to optimize and maximize your drainage. So the more you know, the better you can do, the better person you can be while you're here. You got this. Let's go.